everyone. So we are here at Brighton SEO and I'm here with Matt and Naomi. We've decided to just sit down and do a random podcast conversation kind of thing. We're going to talk about content, brand signals, all the good stuff that's been happening at Brighton as well. So I'll let everyone introduce themselves.
Hey everybody, my name's Matt and I'm a freelance SEO consultant. I've been working in SEO for around 4.5-5 years now in agencies, in-house, and recently made the switch to freelance around 6 months ago. Nice to be here.
I'm Naomi. I am the head of SEO at the Evergreen Agency and I do all things strategy. So that includes digital PR and content and tech and all that good stuff.
And I'm Ray. I started my career in social media. I've mostly worked on the social side of things, but also a lot in organic search. And I'm now trying to balance both whilst freelancing and working in-house. Cool story as well. Naomi actually taught me SEO at my first job. So she was my manager back in the day. But here we are. So the first thing I want to ask you guys is, how have you found Brighton so far? Are there any talks that really stood out to you? Was there anything that was, you thought this is interesting, I want to take this away and actually start implementing this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the fatal mistakes I've made a few times when I've come to Brighton before is not having a game plan for the talks I want to go to and not really thinking about it in advance. But this time I made sure that wasn't the case and I've been able to go to some really good talks. There was one from Tom Kappa about the impact of SGE. I found that super interesting. And of course, I'm not just saying this because he's here, but really enjoyed Ray's talk as well. And I think it highlighted the importance of making sure that you're visible across all of the important platforms for your audience. I've been to quite a few. I think what you said is spot on. I don't normally come with a plan. I'm just like, I'll just go to any talk. But I actually sat down and wrote out the talks that I wanted to go to. There was a really good set of talks this morning on e-commerce. I don't remember the guy's name who did the talk, but it was about specifically looking at trends and how not many trends even make it into the keyword research databases or anything like that, and how you need to really balance what's happening currently and looking at social media, but then also balancing it with the rest of your organic strategy. Because if you just look at your organic strategy with all the historical evergreen content, you're going to be missing out on really good niche trending topics that are actually going to bring you loads of traffic. And then the SERPs Up live podcast as well, because I'm a Wix fangirl.
yeah, that was really good. That's probably my favorite actually from the day, just because they were just talking about everything that I love, like social and how it works with search. And it was great as well because they talked about how you don't really need a degree and you don't really need a set of education that actually takes you into SEO. A lot of the time people are taught by someone else. Naomi taught me, or they learn themselves by building their own sites or just working on client sites. There's no university degree. I don't know if you've seen what they do at unis where they try and teach SEO and it's just stuff from 2010. So often by the time that it's actually released, it's out of date. It's the same with SEO books. I think that when an SEO book comes out, that's great, but 2 years later, now SGE is here and now, Reddit is everywhere on the SERP. So things are changing a lot all the time, so you can't really have an education system set up with you can maybe teach the key concepts, but definitely the Wix one for me, that was really good. So you're an e-commerce expert, right? So we had a guest on yesterday. So we had a guest on yesterday. Well, I say guest like this is an actual podcast, but we had a guest on yesterday who was basically was discussing how a lot of people within the black hat side of SEO maybe actually building out an e-commerce element on their website to rank, just because it sends real signals.
They kind of give the illusion that there's a human expert working in that business just to kind of give Google what they think it needs. And he said he's been seeing some really good results from that. It's not something that I'd personally do or advise, but I suppose it depends what lens you're coming at it from. I work with a lot of businesses and it wouldn't really be a sustainable practice, but for somebody in that space, if you're working on your own websites, your own affiliate sites, it's a bit different. It's completely up to you, I guess.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I would never advocate for that, but if you're a one-man band, a one-woman band, if you're just wanting to rank your affiliate website, whatever it is, then fine, you do you. I personally wouldn't do that, but you do you.
Yeah.
But for I don't want to say actual e-commerce businesses, but big businesses, there's actually so much potential just for your own website that you don't need to do black hat stuff. It's just that so many brands don't
think of like basic things they need to do, like content marketing for e-commerce. I recently published a guide on Wix, if anyone wants to read it. But so many like e-commerce brands don't do that because they're like, oh, we're not a news site, but you don't need to be a news site. You need to like, if you educate your customers, then they will buy from you. It's as simple as that. But they never think to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it works for affiliate sites because you can build an affiliate site into anything you want. But when you're working with a business, you can't just build a random e-commerce store onto like a local plumber's website. Or if you're with a brand that's just like say you're a fintech or something like, you can't just build an e-commerce element onto your website. So I think it does work for affiliate, fair enough. But yeah, like you said, I don't think it'll work on brand. Okay. And in terms of brand signals then, what would be your main things that you go to when you're trying to rank a website? You want it to show up in Google. What brand signals do you think that Google actually cares about?
I suppose in terms of like, showing that you have an established brand, it's exactly kind of what you were talking about in your talk. It's making sure that you're visible in all of the important places for your audience. So the first step is to figure out where exactly they are, and then making sure that you are putting out high quality content and accurate information in all of those places, just to make sure that you're able to actually be seen. And I think if you do that consistently for a period of time, and then you also layer on top of that with, SEO efforts on the website and other channels pushing forwards, then you're probably in the best place. It's not really like the age anymore where you can just focus on one single thing. You have to make sure you're everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. I think social media, you literally have to be everywhere. Because if you think of it from just what we do as humans who like buy things online or go on websites, social media, then Google, then maybe like a bit of Pinterest, then you might like speak to, like there are so many different touch points. You can't like, oh well, our website is optimized, because it's just not good enough anymore. And also from a purely Google side, make sure you got a knowledge panel, because if you haven't got one, Google literally doesn't know who you are, so get one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with that. As a knowledge panel, very important. I think for me, main three signals I think is, I like to look at it as if you took Google away, what would be important to your business. So definitely digital PR in general. I just think that even if you're just getting mentions, just your brand mentions, that's a great brand signal. I know there's a bunch of case studies that were in a few of the talks today where people spoke about how that really helped to grow their brand. And when, especially for startups, I think buy a digital PR package, whether it's from an agency, whether you're buying something, whether you're hiring someone in-house, get that first, because they're trust signals in general. Your audience are going on to say like, there's a few startups I've seen recently in the fintech space where they're very new, and in order to get that buy-in from people, having a logo on your website, or someone coming from The Sun, or I mean, The Sun's not a great example, but like another publication, and especially if it's an industry-specific publication, they're going to see that and go, yeah, I trust this website because they've been featured here. I had this with a startup that does rentals for electric cars, and I saw them in the local newspaper, and I would never have downloaded their app if it wasn't for that. And I downloaded and I used it straight away. They told me after they had their initial kind of publication, their press release done in that, they had their biggest week, their biggest month. And off the back of that, you get natural referrals and it keeps growing. So definitely digital PR. Social signals, I think, build into your brand ecosystem. So you've got to be posting. And it's like we were talking about it earlier, where it's a lot easier to just automate this process. If you don't want to dedicate too much time to it, when I think you should, because organic social is one of the biggest opportunities for any startup or business in that early stage, you should just automate the process. Get it posting on Pinterest for you. Turn your blog post, add a Zapier connection, whatever it is, to Canva, post it onto Pinterest, and do the same thing on Instagram, do the same thing on Twitter. I think Crystal Carter mentioned about the RSS feed. Yeah, all these different things. You need to be doing them. And then outside of that, I think it's just topical authority. If you're building out that brand, and if you're building out that content strategy and you're reaching that topical depth, that's of a level that's not just that typical SEO content, it's more of that niche style content where possible, and those really like unique terms that other people aren't talking about, then you're going to be covering that topic as a whole, and people are going to say, oh yeah, this brand knows what they're talking about, because every time I search for anything related to this, they come up. So I think that's an important brand signal as well, and it plays a big part. I would go on to authors as well, but we'd be here for too long, but I think authors play a huge part in that.
Yeah.
Kind of like touch on what you said, and I think it does feel like it's a really long process, like setting up all your social media channels properly and regularly posting. But it's one of those things that once it becomes part of your routine, it can be really quick. You can just dedicate like half a day, like on one of the weeks in the month to, to create all of your posting, and then you can schedule it with one of those platforms. I think there's one that I saw on AppSumo, which is like, I think it's $49 lifetime access. I think it's called Marky. It's really good. It works in the same way as like Hootsuite and all of those tools, but yeah, it's something that's definitely worth doing. And then you also touched on like unlinked mentions, and I think that's such a quick win. Like if you guys have access to Ahrefs or SE ranking, I don't know how it works in SEMrush, but you can just see mentions of your brand that haven't actually been linked back to your website. For a large brand that isn't actually focusing on those efforts, that can be one of the quickest ways to get new backlinks.
No, just to yeah, 100%. Like at the end of the day, it's a lot of effort, but do you want to make money or not is what I would always say. Like people say they want to get all these results, but they don't want to spend their time doing it. There are things you can do to automate it, to speed it up, but if you're not willing to put the effort in, then you, probably controversial, but you probably shouldn't expect to get much out of it. And that's a big education piece as well, especially like working in an agency, having to educate like the clients and helping them understand. But then the ones that get it, when they do get it, they're the ones that are flying. You get out what you put in at the end of the day.
Agreed. And I understand the efficiency side of it, because people want to speed things up. That's human nature, right? Yeah. And it saves money, and budgets are tight right now, but I think you've got to think long term. Any type of brand building, every campaign, think 6 months ahead, a year ahead, 5 years ahead. Where do you want your brand to grow to? What do you want it to be known for? And if you want those quick wins, then just think about it. In 5 years, that's what your brand is going to be known for. I think you've really got to put that work in to build that authority, especially in the early stages. I'm speaking a lot about startups because I've had a lot of experience recently working with startups, and I think especially for them, quick wins are really important. But you can get those quick wins doing it authentically and building those real brand signals. The only thing is sometimes that costs a lot, or if it doesn't cost a lot and you're doing organic social, you're doing organic SEO, it just costs time, and you need to put that time in instead. It just depends on what you prefer to do. So Matt, you're, like you said, you're an expert in consultancy and freelancing, and the clients you're working with right now, what brand signals are you trying to push for your freelance clients? Because obviously you're on your own, like just doing this. You don't have a digital PR arm at the moment. But you don't have a digital PR arm or anything at the moment. But so what are you doing for the brand signals for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to stuff that's outside of my wheelhouse, like I wouldn't say that I have digital PR expertise. I'm quite good at spotting an opportunity, but executing's is its own job. So I've got like a community of other freelancers that I work with, and small boutique agencies that support me on tasks occasionally. So I just make sure that I always surround myself with people that have the answers when I don't, and then I can lean on them. But in terms of brand signals, it's fairly similar to what I was saying before. Just making sure that people are visible in the right places, and if there's publications that we know would be good to get links from, then it's a case of working with an expert in that area to kind of get that done.
For you, Naomi, coming from like an agency background, what kind of things do you focus on the side of things that's like more brand signals that might be different to what a freelance or what Matt's doing?
Yeah. So one thing that we're doing, going back to knowledge panels, they're a big thing, mainly because this is purely from like, I suppose, pure Google side. Because if Google knows what your brand is, then they know what you do, and it's all to do with entities, which we won't go into because we will be here forever. But like, long story short, if Google recognizes that your brand name equals your brand, this is a very simplified version, but then everything after that is going to be way easier. So that's one thing we really push for. Also, because we are an agency and the businesses that we work with tend to be bigger businesses, it is easier for them to implement. So that's one thing. But then also what you were saying, just encouraging people to like share the content that because we do content. So we'll do the content, it'll go live, and then like we'll be like, have you shared this? I'm like, no, it's just on the blog. Like, no, put it on your social media. Can it be turned into a Pinterest post? All of that kind of stuff. We're making sure that at every touch point, their audience is seeing them anywhere other than Google. Seeing them in Google, yes, but it needs to be shared, and it needs to be shared beyond just their agency, because at the end of the day, they're the brands, and they need, again, going back to authors and like experts, the experts need to be pushing that content out. So yeah, I agree. I think that right now, if you're just publishing content just on Google, it's not enough, because your competitors aren't. Most of the time, they're probably not even focusing solely on Google. Their main channel for most brands that I've spoken to is social platforms. So you need to be competing there. And it's like I said this in my talk earlier, basically, that
the search journey is actually growing. It's not like Google is being replaced, but the search journey is growing. So a lot more of the time, people are starting their search journey on places like TikTok or like Instagram, and then they're going over to Google afterwards. So if they're seeing you across all of these different points, that's so many different touch points that they're building a rapport with you. I think it takes 7 touch points for a customer to actually purchase from you, and you're getting like 3 of these for free just by posting on these different platforms. You need to be part of the conversation is what I think is important, because the conversation is happening with or without you. So make sure that, doesn't matter if it's on TikTok, doesn't matter if it's on Pinterest, whatever the relative topic is, same way that we would categorize by keyword when you're ranking on Google, categorize by hashtag, categorize by keyword on platforms like TikTok, like Reddit, and be involved with those communities there so that you're relevant across the board. It works on a multi-channel level, because real viral, I was speaking about this earlier as well, where real virality, I now think, comes from, it's no longer just on a single platform, because most of the time, a lot of brands, I mean, it's not easy to go viral, and anyone who tells you is lying to you, but a lot more brands, what they're doing now is they can make themselves gain a lot of traction on one platform, say like TikTok, because the organic reach was great. It's not as great as it used to be, but there's still an opportunity to grow there. But then what they'll do is they'll realize, oh, a lot more brands, this is happening for them. I think real viral is when you go viral, like you get a lot of traction on TikTok, but then you amplify that on Instagram, but then you're also pushing paid ads behind something that's relevant to that topic, and then you're also ranking on Google for that, and then you do a digital PR campaign on top of that, because that's on a multi-channel level, and that's what real viral feels like, because everyone's talking about you. There was a campaign they talked about earlier, shout out to Bold Imagination who did this, and they talked about how the Dead NFTs campaign, which was just multi-platform, like it went viral on Reddit, it went crazy on different publications, it was just everywhere. And the reason it was able to pick up so much and go so crazy was because it was on every single platform. And within that space, it wasn't just the newspapers that were picking up on them. It wasn't just the social media outlets. It was industry-specific publications, which, by the way, like for SEO is amazing, because those are so relevant links. Those links are just so relevant to that brand, and it can really help you grow. So yeah, I think it's across the board for that.
Just on that, that's such a good point. In terms of virality, I think people need to look, no matter what industry you're in, but I think like the fashion industry is really good at this. Like there are trends with like Adidas Sambas, for example. Everyone's got them, they're great, but that whole trend and the fact that they sold so much, I mean, they're a bit now because of Rishi Sunak, but okay. But that whole thing didn't just happen because Adidas ranked on Google. That happened because they rank on Google because they're Adidas. Okay, yeah, but they're also doing ads. There are Pinterest boards based around Adidas Sambas. There are influencers, social media, all of that. Like that's a truly viral product, but that didn't just come from like Google, and it would never have done what it did if that had happened. And speaking of the Rishi Sunak thing, the flip side of it, that didn't just happen because there was one news story. There was a news story, then there was social media, then people talking about it on TikTok and all of that kind of stuff. That's where it comes from. It has to be multi-touch point. And also just as human beings, we don't just look at one thing and go, I'm going to buy that. That's not how we buy things. So businesses need to think, okay, how do I buy things? I need to replicate that.
I think it also like on a sub-community level as well, because it's like when you go on the TikTok comments, and then sometimes the comments are funnier than the video, right? So you'll see when something goes real viral, people will make so many inside jokes about it, and that's where the community culture comes in. I spoke about this earlier as well, where you should be speaking in a way where you're using like brand language, consumer language within your content, and you can pick that up off these platforms. But that only happens when it's getting to the comments, when it's reached that sub community level. But
something that, like, you know, businesses watching this, if there are any, might find this really overwhelming. The fact that we're saying, you know, you've got to have a multi-pronged approach and be visible everywhere, and it is a lot of work. Like, it is a lot of work, but at the same time, something that I always chat about with my clients is making your content work harder for you versus duplicating your efforts in different places. So if you've got a long form article, how can you repurpose that into, you know, social media content? How could you create like a supporting video that you can put out on YouTube instead of creating a video about something different and posts about something different? If you can do that, then it makes the job of, you know, the teams working together much easier, but the key is getting them to work together.
Just on that as well, that's such a good point. So we do digital PR and content, and then where obviously there's a lot of crossover with that, normally or sometimes it will be led by a content idea, but we know that there can be bits that can be used for digital PR and social media. So then our teams will work together and we'll write the content, but then the digital PR team will say, can you add these 5 things, because then I can push it out on social, or not on social, sorry, I can then pitch it, and then the client will give them tidbits that they can put out on social. So that's one content piece, one idea, which is then used on all these platforms. And the client's not had to do anything other than provide some expertise and basically sign it off.
Yeah, so it makes it it keeps the efficiency in there, right? Keeps it all running quickly. Okay, quick final question. Well, I say quick, it's a bit of a big question, but I'm going to do it for 2 ways. So, because I don't know who's going to be listening, but if you were to give a piece of advice to a small brand, but also to say a startup, or a larger organization, so I want 1 tip for each, what would be your 1 tip for Brand Signal's SEO to really help them rank? So 1 for a small brand, 1 for a large organization.
Okay, yeah, no pressure. Okay, yeah, I'd say probably my biggest tip would be to not overcomplicate things, because the amount of information that's out there at the moment is insane. And I think even as an SEO consultant, sometimes you're looking at all of it and you're like, wait a second, what can I believe? And you have to go to your verified sources. But ultimately, it comes down to, pretty simple principles. You put out high quality content, you make sure that you're visible in the right places and you're doing the right things, not looking for shortcuts, and, you'll be on a good path. Even if the search results at the moment seem really unsteady and you don't know when it's going to go back to where it should go back to, everybody, deep down knows that it's going to go back to where it should ultimately.
For a small brand, I would say you can only do what you can do at the end of the day. If you're a 1-man band or 2 or 3 or woman, don't stress too much. Basically what you were saying, like, don't stress too much about trying to focus on all these different things. I think if you're going to focus on one thing, content, maybe really good guides, but make sure that you are doing it in a way that it can make the dissemination of that content really easy, because that will make your life easier. On the flip side, if you're a big business and you have multiple teams, my 1 piece of advice would be to collaborate more with your sales teams and your social media teams, because they're the people that are on the ground and they know what the community is saying, like what your customers are saying, and that is really good information that you cannot get from kind of keyword dashboards and things, not dashboards, databases and things like that. That's like trends before it happens, like emerging trends that you can use and put content out about. And that is the kind of content that can go viral, yes, but it's also good evergreen content which will resonate and will ultimately generate sales.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, for a smaller business, I would just say digital PR as like a one-off tactic. If I was gonna work with a startup, I would say digital PR is the best chance, just because off the back of that, a campaign goes viral, even if it's a small campaign. You pick up across all platforms, and if you can only focus on one channel, which a lot of startups often they focus on 1-2 channels and that's it, I would definitely say digital PR if you can. Organic social, definitely. B2B business, get on LinkedIn. If you're consumer based, get on TikTok. Best places, I think, just organic growth. It's free, it doesn't cost a lot. You just need to learn it yourself. Most of it you can learn yourself. So I think low barrier to entry as well for any startup. So definitely there. For bigger organizations, definitely multi-channel alignment, because right now, one thing that I notice in a lot of bigger organizations is that often teams are so far apart from each other because teams are so big. So it almost feels like you're doing this one campaign, you're just running this one channel, but it's not crossing over at all with people that are working in social, people working in digital PR. You really want to get that cross-channel communication. And that is as simple as putting in a meeting with the people who do the doing within every channel once a month, maybe every 2 weeks. That's literally all you need, and having a review every quarterly, like a quarterly review, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page and they know what they're talking about. But yeah, well, thank you guys for joining me. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.